I'm going to begin this morning with a quiz. Since school's back in session, I figured we should have a quiz today. The topic is movie quotes. And there's one question on the quiz, and it's that you finish this quote. Now, I'm going to know a lot about you if you are able to finish this quote. So here it goes. Are you ready? If you know it, just finish it. Call it out loud and finish it. Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. Well done. Well done. How many of you aced that quiz? All right, good job. Some of you need to go back to Star Wars school and learn the material better. That is Princess Leia, whose recording was sent by the droid R2-D2 to secure the help of the Jedi Master Obi-Wan Kenobi. Now that most of you are lost totally, I will tell you that the Star Wars story is a story of hope. Rebellions are built on hope, after all, and how hope interrupts the life of the main character, Luke Skywalker in this case, and calls him to a greater purpose. Hope can interrupt our lives and call us to greater purpose. Of course, we are thinking about stories of hope this entire series. These figures in the Bible whose stories were an expression of hope or somehow emerged from hope in their life. A couple of weeks ago, we thought about the story of Joseph and how the dreams of that story inspire hope. And our dream board in the back of the room is almost full. I'm keep adding to it. They're just wonderful. I don't know how many of you have stopped to read the dreams of the congregation, but we are working on procuring a unicorn as quickly as possible. That's one of them. So we talked about Joseph's dreams. And then last week, Pastor Lauren, who was here, told us Hannah's story and her prayers, her hopeful prayers that were her flex as she prayed that God would be with her and with her son who was yet to be born. And now we have another story. It's about this character whose name is Jairus. Is how you say that. And it's actually not really Jairus' story because, like hope does, Jairus' story is interrupted by a second story that we heard today. This sequence, by the way, happens in all three of the synoptic gospels. Matthew, Mark, and Luke all tell this story of Jairus coming to Jesus, whose story is then interrupted by a woman asking for healing before it continues on. So we have this first story where Jesus is arriving, probably at Capernaum. It's at least somewhere that he was expected. And so there's a welcome party of sorts. He's being greeted. He's being welcomed home again. The people know him and they have expected his return. And so here he is being welcomed when Jairus comes up to him directly and interrupts his homecoming. I mean, have you ever had someone who just interrupted your party? It's not cool, man. Jairus, we're having a party here. Jairus is clearly leaning into his privilege as a leader of the synagogue to be able to come up to Jesus directly and say, I want you to heal my daughter. Now, we have some empathy for him, certainly. He's asking for healing from his daughter, but he does have the audacity to interrupt this party and come up to Jesus and ask him, come to my house and heal my daughter. And so they head towards Jairus' house when the story is interrupted again, but this time it is a very, very different interruption. A woman comes into the scene, a woman who we should say in all three of the gospel versions of this story, we never learn her name, as so often happens with women characters in the biblical narrative. A woman comes up to Jesus, but not directly to his face, not to speak to him directly, not to interrupt him at all necessarily, but rather to just simply reach out her hand and see if she can touch the fringe of his garment. This woman had been hemorrhaging blood for 12 years. And it's not like she hadn't tried to find a cure. She had, in fact, it's recorded, exhausted all of her money on physicians. They couldn't fix the problem. And as you can imagine, with this much bleeding happening over this length of time, the physical toll it was taking on this woman had to be immense. When you lose that much blood, you're anemic, you're weak, there's constant pain, you are exhausted most of the time. And also, as it turns out, in this culture, this woman not only would have been feeling these physical symptoms, but she would also have been ostracized from her community because she would have been considered ritually unclean. The Reverend Alicia Riepma writes, her normal existence would often have been spent watching people skirt around her to avoid the possibility of contact. No brushing or touching or sharing friendly gestures on the path. She lived in isolation and would have been known for her uncleanliness. Can you imagine? Of course, the contrast is as clear as it could be, isn't it? This woman is unnamed, she is powerless, she is marginalized, she is considered impure. And when you compare that to where we started, we not only know the guy's name, Jairus, he is a leader in the synagogue. He has the power, he is centralized in this story. He is a leader in a place where the woman would have been forbidden from even going in the first place. She does not walk up to Jesus directly. She does not approach him face to face. She just wants to touch the fringe, important word, fringe, of his garment. Steve Wall-Smith often sends me a Yiddish or Jewish word of the week, and he has yet to send me the word tzitzit. Work on that one. Because your tzitzit is the name of this tassel that hangs down at the bottom of the garment of a traditional Jewish clothing. And it has a religious meaning. It has a theological meaning. The purpose of the fringe is a reminder of the commandments of God. Numbers 15 is where we read about this piece of clothing. It is a reminder to align your life with the goodness of God. It is a reminder to align your life with God's desires for your life. It is a reminder of God's presence and God's will. And so the woman reaches out to touch this fringe, this reminder of God's presence, this reminder of God's goodness. She is bold enough to break the rules and risk, heaven forbid, touching another person. And she is immediately healed. She's immediately healed. And the story would have proceeded, it would have gone on. They would have moved on to Jairus' house, and we'd have had the second chapter of that story, were it not for Jesus stopping in that moment and saying an absolutely ridiculous thing. Who touched me? In the middle of a welcome home party where everyone is excited to see him and crowded around him, reaching out to shake his hand, give him a high five or fist bump or whatever they did in Capernaum in the ancient Near East, he asked, "Who touched me?" And his disciples comment about the ridiculousness of this question. "Lord, what do you mean, who touched you? You're getting bumped and jostled and moved around all the time as you're walking through this crowd." And Jesus says, no, someone touched me. I sensed power leave my body. I sensed a touch. And at first the woman remains hidden in the crowd. If you caught that detail in the story, it's very interesting to note that at first she tries to fade even further back into the crowd so that she's not noticed. At first she doesn't say anything. But Jesus asks again and again and again until eventually she comes forward and she says what just had happened here. And she names her infirmity. She talks about herself in a way that maybe she had never been able to before. When she realizes she could not remain hidden, she comes forward, and Jesus responds to her. And the first word he says is, "Daughter, daughter, your faith has made you well." Daughter, can we not overestimate? We cannot overestimate the amount of courage it took for her to do this, to come forward and to make herself known. The Reverend Dr. Stephanie Crowder says that the heart of the matter isn't the source of the woman's issue or hemorrhaging, but the fact that because of her faith, she pushes her impure body boldly into an arena where even a healthy woman should not have been. She pushes into this space, motivated by hope, motivated to interrupt the proceedings, and not just interrupt the proceedings, but interrupt the expectations of those around her, interrupt the norms, interrupt the standards of society, reach out and touch someone. She pushes into this space, and Jesus calls her daughter with one word. Jesus affirms her interruption of the societal norms. With one word, Jesus lifts her back into connection and community, interrupting those layers of stigma that she's lived with for 12 years and restoring her place in the chosen family, indicating this intimate connection. Daughter. I wonder if that word caught Jairus' ear. Oh, remember Jairus? He's the one who started this whole thing, and he's still standing there, waiting to get to his daughter who's about to die. And here he hears the Lord calling this outcast, unclean woman, daughter. What must Jairus have felt in that moment? Now, granted that the Bible doesn't describe his reaction, but we can only imagine how it felt for him to be interrupted in this way, how it felt for him to be annoyed or impatient or somehow, let's get going. My daughter's about to die. And so then in that moment, as we get back to story number 1, the people come up to Jairus and they say, it's over. She's gone. You don't need to worry about bringing Jesus back home again. To which Jesus replies, no, she's not dead. She's just sleeping. He goes into Jairus' home and he breaks the rules by grabbing the young girl by her hand. It is ritually unclean, impure to touch a corpse, to touch a dead body. But he reaches out and he touches this dead body of this girl, and she comes to life and gets out of bed. And he says, get her something to eat, interrupting the norms and expectation and restoring her place in the community again. Hope is an interrupting force. In these two interwoven stories, there's just one interruption after another. Jairus interrupts Jesus' homecoming in the hope that Jesus can heal his daughter. The woman interrupts Jesus' trip to Jairus' house in the hope that he can heal her. And Jesus interrupts the norms and expectations of the community by fulfilling their hopes and healing both people. Hope is a force capable of interrupting pain and suffering, and it's a force present in the world today as well. One of the reasons I decided to do this series, focusing on hope, is based on the number of conversations I've had with people who are feeling hope in short supply. If that's you, let me assure you that you are not alone in that feeling. I have had multiple conversations that have involved people in tears of frustration, at the scope of pain and suffering being inflicted on our neighbors in this world. Hopelessness that is exacerbated when it seems like those who are in power seem unwilling to do anything to alleviate that pain, ease the fear, or lessen the struggle that we all are experiencing. Hope is an interrupting force that is capable of interrupting the pain and suffering we see in the world around us. The examples are actually quite numerous. One of the things I've heard corresponding to the sense of hopelessness is, I wish someone would do something. As it turns out, a whole lot of someones are doing a whole lot of things to ease the suffering that we see in the world and to bring hope into our midst, interrupting their lives in so many ways, in ways to resist the suffering and harm that's being done. Last weekend, the life of a woman named Sparkle, actually. Sparkle Suknanan is her name. She was born in Trinidad and Tobago, so they named their kids Sparkle there, I guess, which is wonderful. Her life was interrupted at 2:30 a.m. last Sunday morning. So middle of the night interruption, middle of a holiday weekend interruption. Just so happens that Sparkle Suknanan is not only someone born in Trinidad and Tobago, she's not only someone who graduated summa cum laude from her law school, she's also a U.S. district judge in Washington, D.C. And the people calling her in the middle of the night were immigration lawyers who had called her to tell her that their clients were being deported. Their clients, all of whom were unaccompanied minors from Guatemala, had been rounded up in the middle of the night, in the middle of a holiday weekend, to be deported back home again. They interrupted Judge Sukanan's sleep. She got to work, and she stopped those deportations from happening. These children would have been in danger, some of them, if they had gone back to Guatemala. Some of them would have had nobody to return to. They had no family there to meet them. Some of them were high school students, my understanding. Some of them honors students flourishing in their high school careers here in our countries. The lawyers that represented them in the immigration process interrupted this process, eased their suffering, and gave the system time to actually work the process that we do have in place to address these kinds of situations. Did I mention her name is Sparkle? People are allowing hope to interrupt their lives in so many ways. This kind of courage, this kind of audacity to interrupt your night's sleep and push into a situation where you don't necessarily belong and interrupt plans to cause trauma and suffering for dozens of children. This is as powerful an expression of hope as you will ever see. And it's just one of dozens, of hundreds, of thousands of expressions of hope, the cumulative effect of which will turn the tide of tyranny once and for all. Because hope interrupts the plans of tyranny. Hope interrupts injustice being done. Hope interrupts oppression in this world. Hope interrupts the marginalization and disenfranchisement of people. Hope interrupts the spiritual forces of wickedness at work in this world. Thanks be to God that hope interrupts our lives. You know, speaking of Princess Leia, in The Last Jedi, General Leia Organa said, "Hope is like the sun. If you only believe in it when you see it, you'll never make it through the night." Dear friends, Church of Jesus Christ, I'm here to tell you, we are going to make it through the night. We are going to make it through the night. I know this because I believe that God is with us, that God is present in the midst of suffering. God is with us in the midst of our pain, in the midst of our struggle, in the midst of the injustice we see in the world around us. God is present with us. All we need to do is push into places where we don't necessarily belong and have the audacity to reach out to Jesus in the hope that we might simply touch the fringe of his garment and be reminded of the goodness of God. And it is in this hope that we will be healed. Would you pray with me? God of hope, may the words of my mouth, may the meditations of all of our hearts be truly acceptable to you, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen.